Do you believe in monsters? Have you ever imagined being the one to hunt them down? Imagine stepping into a world where the things lurking in the shadows are not just figments of imagination, but real, living entities. It's easy to dismiss the idea of monsters as something from folklore or horror films, yet in my line of work, it's far more than fiction. It's reality. Some creatures are things you might not even recognize if you saw them. They blend seamlessly into the everyday, sometimes existing just a shade outside of human sight and understanding. The monsters I deal with are tangible, though, with intentions, desires, and in some cases, an intelligence that surpasses our own. If you're curious about what it means to hunt monsters, let me introduce you to a world far different from anything you know. My name is unimportant, but my role, that's something you won't forget. I'm not a hero. I'm not here to save the world or uphold some noble ideal. I'm here because somewhere along the way, I found myself embroiled in a world that most would run from. A world where monsters are real. But don't imagine a picture-perfect hunter with a fierce gaze, unwavering resolve, and a life full of victories. That image couldn't be further from the truth. The job of a monster hunter isn't glamorous. It's filled with scars, both visible and invisible, that each tell a story of close calls, near escapes, and the high cost of surviving in a realm you barely understand. It's a life that questions the very essence of courage and purpose. I didn't choose this life, not really. Like many hunters, I stumbled into it, and somewhere along the way I realized I couldn't just walk away. There's something terrifyingly captivating about the hunt. It brings out parts of you that you'd never acknowledge otherwise: fear, desperation, and a strange, grim determination to see things through, regardless of the cost. Over the years, I've faced some of the most horrific beings imaginable. They aren't just things with fangs or claws or ghostly silhouettes floating in the dark. Monsters have personalities, histories, and motives as complex as any humans. In fact, some of them are far more human than we'd like to admit. And therein lies the twist. This isn't a tale of a clear-cut battle between good and evil. It's a narrative that challenges what you think you know about humanity and monstrosity. The world around us is teeming with creatures that walk unseen. Some people might call them monsters. Others would say they're simply another form of life that exists outside our understanding. They don't conform to human laws or social structures. They live by a code that is as old as the earth itself. Many of them go about their lives quietly, tucked away from human interference, and they have no interest in disturbing our world. They inhabit the forests, the deep caves, the far-flung mountains, places where few humans dare to tread. Yet, there are those who don't keep to themselves, those who venture into human spaces with malicious intent or simple disregard for our boundaries. They don't view us as equals. To some, we're a curiosity. To others, prey. And that's where I come in. For the ones that go too far, the ones that break the fragile truce that exists between our worlds, there has to be someone who steps in and restores balance. I am part of a small, hidden community that takes on this responsibility. People often wonder if there's a secret agency, an organization with covert operations and hidden files, tracking these creatures and handling the dangers that arise. I can tell you that these suspicions are true. There exists a shadowy entity that very few people have heard of, the FB. You won't find it in any official government records, and no one really knows who started it or how it has managed to stay hidden for so long. The FB doesn't just train hunters. It cultivates a certain kind of person, one who can operate between the lines of normal society and a world teetering on the edge of nightmare. The FB takes individuals with unique skills and experiences and transforms them into something more. Hunters aren't just trained fighters. They are investigators, linguists, survivalists, and strategists. Our training is rigorous and unrelenting because each mission we take on carries the risk of failure, and failure here means more than death. It means unleashing something dark and uncontrollable into a world that isn't prepared for it. The FB operates in complete secrecy because the general public cannot know the truth. There are protocols in place to keep these encounters hidden from public view, to erase any trace of the monsters that lurk among us. When a mission goes wrong and a creature gets too close to public awareness, we have to step in, erase memories, doctor records, and clean up any traces that might be left behind. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another story. It's a collection of experiences, each one laced with terror, doubt, and the cold reality that sometimes even the monsters aren't as monstrous as we think. This journey will take you into the depths of both the human psyche and the unnatural realms that exist alongside ours. These tales are woven from personal experiences and the endless moral quandaries that come from doing this job. Are you ready to question what separates humanity from monstrosity? Are you prepared to see the hidden side of the world, to learn about creatures that will challenge everything you thought you knew about fear and morality? Some of these tales are horrifying, others tragic, and some even strangely touching. The lines between good and evil, human and monster, blur in ways that will make you wonder where the boundaries truly lie. Let's embark on this journey together. Along the way, I'll share stories that might chill you to the bone, accounts that will stir your empathy, and insights that will force you to reconsider what it means to be human. This isn't just a glimpse into the world of monster hunting. It's a mirror held up to our own nature. So hold tight, stay alert, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones that look back at you from the mirror. Growing up, I never imagined I'd become a monster hunter. Like most people, I believed that the terrifying creatures of horror stories were nothing more than tales meant to thrill and scare. My life was typical, filled with everyday joys and challenges, and the monsters I faced back then were more metaphorical. Deadlines, self-doubt, and the occasional family drama. But one night changed everything. It was about my sister. She was the kind of person who could brighten a room with a single smile. One evening, she went out with friends, heading to a place just outside town for their usual late-night bonfire. They had done it countless times, gathering under the stars, roasting marshmallows, and sharing stories. But that night, they stumbled upon something none of them could have expected, a creature that seemed pulled straight from a nightmare. When the police found her, they could barely piece together what had happened. Her friends were in shock, speaking of a shadow with eyes that had appeared out of nowhere, dragging her into the darkness before any of them could react. The official report listed it as an animal attack, perhaps a stray bear or cougar, and the case was quietly closed. But I couldn't accept it. The details didn't match, the wounds didn't fit, and her friends, though traumatized, couldn't shake what they'd seen. After that night, I was never the same. My grief transformed into a burning curiosity mixed with determination. I couldn't rest until I found the truth. I spent hours researching, delving into stories, folklore, and police reports that matched what her friends had described. I went down a rabbit hole of ancient myths, modern sightings, and unexplained disappearances. Slowly, I came to a realization I had once laughed at. Monsters might be real. And if they were, I wanted to find them. And it wasn't just about revenge, it was about understanding and ensuring that no one else would have to suffer the same fate. The FB, the organization that operates in the shadows, keeping these creatures and the world of humans from colliding in catastrophic ways. I didn't know they existed until I was already in deep, and by that point, I was too invested to turn back. I thought I was alone in my obsession, but one night, while following a lead on an online forum, I received an anonymous message. It was an address, a time, and a simple message. If you want answers, be there. The address led me to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. I was half convinced it was a joke or a trap, but I couldn't resist. When I walked in, I was met with a handful of people, each one looking just as haunted as I was. They didn't ask about my story, my reasons. They already knew. They had their own. I quickly learned that this wasn't just a support group. This was the FB's initiation process. They didn't care about resumes, credentials, or academic degrees. What they cared about was resilience, courage, and a willingness to do what was necessary. Training was brutal. I was thrown into simulations, forced to confront scenarios that tested my physical and mental limits. One of our instructors, an ex-Marine who had seen more creatures than I could have imagined, constantly reminded us, "Monsters don't care about your strength, they care about your mind. You break up here." He tapped his head. "And you're done for." We learned tactics, tracking, and survival, but the hardest lessons were about letting go of what we thought we knew. There were moments I almost quit. We had drills where we were exposed to things we couldn't even explain. Shadows that moved on their own, sounds that echoed from nowhere, glimpses of eyes in places there shouldn't be eyes. The FB didn't just teach us to fight. They taught us to confront the unknown and to do so without the assurance that we'd make it out. We were told that failure was common, that even seasoned hunters didn't always return. The FB was a place of ruthlessness wrapped in secrecy, and it hardened us in ways I couldn't have anticipated. One night, we faced a creature far more terrifying than a ghoul, a wraith, a being that existed almost entirely in the spectral plane, manifesting in our world only enough to feed. It had a way of slipping through walls, phasing in and out of sight, and it was intelligent. It toyed with us, letting us catch glimpses only to vanish before we could react. The encounter left me shaken. The wraith was unlike any other creature I'd seen. It seemed aware, almost sentient, and it left me questioning what I had signed up for. The FB had warned us that doubt was dangerous in this line of work, but doubt crept in nonetheless. After the wraith encounter, I wondered if what we were doing was truly helping anyone, or if we were simply waging a never-ending war against creatures who wanted the same thing we did: survival. I questioned what right we had to judge them, to decide who lived and who died. These early encounters forced me to confront not only my fear, but the very essence of my beliefs about monsters. The creatures weren't just obstacles, they were mirrors, showing me aspects of my own nature I hadn't considered. I was terrified, yes, but I was also exhilarated. The adrenaline, the close calls, and the thrill of facing something beyond human understanding became a strange addiction. I soon learned that the life of a monster hunter is one of paradoxes. We were protectors, yet killers. We were seekers of truth, yet cloaked in secrecy. Each mission became not just a test of my skills, but a test of my mind, forcing me to confront the darkness both outside and within. In those first few months, I realized there was no going back. The life I once knew was gone, replaced by a new reality where the boundaries between fear and fascination, courage and recklessness, humanity and monstrosity blurred into one. And as terrifying as it was, I knew one thing for sure. This was where I belonged. My first mission arrived sooner than I had anticipated. I was paired with a senior hunter named Graham, a man whose cold eyes and stern demeanor left no room for mistakes. The assignment seemed straightforward. A series of animal attacks had been reported on the outskirts of a small town. The police dismissed them as coyotes or a wild dog, but the FB harbored suspicions of something more sinister. They suspected a ghoul, a creature that fed on the life force of its victims. We arrived late at night, the forest teeming with unsettling sounds. My training had taught me to spot the signs, and they were all present. Claw marks etched into the trees, patches of trampled earth, an eerie stillness in certain areas, as if even the birds sensed to stay silent. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the first time I actually saw the creature. It was watching us. At first, I didn't see it, but Graham raised his weapon, pointing into the shadows. Slowly, it emerged, a hunchbacked figure with elongated limbs and eyes that glowed with a sickly light. My heart raced, every instinct screaming to flee. But I forced myself to remember the training, grounded my fear, and focused. As it lunged, I raised my weapon, my hand trembling. Graham fired, striking it square in the chest. The creature let out a shriek, a high-pitched, unnatural sound that sent chills down my spine. Even after the encounter ended, the adrenaline still coursed through me. A sense of dread settled in as I realized that hunting monsters was far different from what I had imagined. It was violent, unpredictable, and deeply horrifying. The creature's lifeless body lay at our feet, and I found myself staring, grappling with questions about what it had been and what drove it to the fringes of human society. Graham caught the look in my eyes and said, "Don't think about it. They're not like us. They don't care about right or wrong. They just survive, however they can." That was my first lesson. Monsters don't possess morals. They aren't evil by our standards. They're driven solely by instincts and needs beyond our understanding. Yet, a part of me couldn't help but glimpse a trace of humanity in the creature's eyes, a fleeting glimpse of something more than mere beast. As I embarked on more missions, my understanding of these creatures deepened. Each encounter revealed something new, not just about the monsters, but about myself. I realized I wasn't as fearless as I had believed. that the sight of certain creatures still sent shivers down my spine, even after multiple encounters. I learned to trust my instincts, to rely on the oppressive silence of the forest and the haunting patterns within the shadows. One thing you quickly learn as a monster hunter is that each creature has its own set of rules and distinct characteristics, making every encounter unpredictable. Over time, I've faced a range of monsters, from beings that seemed almost harmless to those that would haunt anyone's nightmares. One of the more common creatures we encounter is the Wraith. These spectral beings exist in the liminal space between life and death. They're not fully corporeal, often appearing as flickers of shadow or floating wisps in the dark. Wraiths usually haunt specific places or people, feeding off fear and despair. What makes them dangerous is their intelligence. They understand their prey's emotions and manipulate them, creating illusions or tapping into repressed memories. But Wraiths are not mindless killers. They feed selectively, and some even seem to mourn their own state, as if trapped in endless suffering. Another type I've faced multiple times is the Ghoul. Ghouls are more grounded in the physical world than Wraiths, driven by raw, unrestrained hunger. They often inhabit graveyards or abandoned areas, feeding off corpses but occasionally attacking humans if food is scarce. Ghouls are stronger and faster than humans, and their senses are highly attuned to the scent of blood and fear. They're not particularly smart, but their aggression and resilience make them dangerous, especially in packs. Then there are the Fenrir wolves. These creatures are massive, far larger than any ordinary wolf, and they travel in small packs. Their distinguishing feature is their fur, which is as dark as night and often mistaken for shadows moving through the trees. The Fenrir wolves are incredibly territorial, and though they typically don't stray into human areas, they'll attack without hesitation if they feel threatened. Unlike regular wolves, they possess a form of heightened intelligence and can coordinate attacks that feel almost strategic. Finally, the Revenants are possibly the most dangerous. These creatures are akin to vengeful spirits trapped in decaying bodies. They're driven by intense, unfulfilled desires, usually revenge, and will stop at nothing to get what they want. Revenants are relentless, with the ability to heal themselves over time. They possess a twisted, unwavering sense of purpose, and their strength increases the longer they remain in our world. Hunting a Revenant is often a last resort mission. They are not easily killed and tend to cause devastation wherever they roam. I'll never forget one particular encounter with a Revenant. It was stalking the outskirts of a small village, and reports came in about unexplained deaths that were unusually brutal. When my team arrived, we quickly realized we were dealing with something far beyond our usual cases. The creature was almost human-looking, but with gray, decayed flesh stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Its eyes burned with an unnatural light, a sign that it was feeding off an unquenchable rage. We set up traps using salt and iron, substances known to weaken or repel certain types of revenants. But this one was cunning. It watched us from a distance, testing the boundaries we'd set before finally attacking with a speed that none of us anticipated. I remember the raw force of its blows, each one feeling like it could break bones. We had to adjust our strategy quickly, using a combination of fire and iron weapons. Eventually, we managed to trap it in a circle of salt, dousing it in a special concoction designed to sever its link to this world. But even as it dissolved, it stared at us with a look that felt almost human. Another battle that remains vivid in my memory was with a pack of Fenrir wolves. We were tracking them through a dense forest when we found ourselves surrounded. They moved so quietly that by the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The wolves attacked from all sides, and each time we thought we had the upper hand, they shifted their positions, targeting our weaknesses. I remember one wolf lunging at me with jaws wide open. In a split second, I aimed for its eyes, managing to wound it enough to drive it back. But as we fought, exhaustion set in, and we were only able to fend them off by scaling nearby trees to escape their reach. The encounter with a Wraith was a different type of battle altogether. Wraiths don't attack directly, but play with your mind, using your own fears against you. We had been called to a deserted mansion that was supposedly haunted, and as soon as we stepped inside, the temperature dropped and shadows began to shift. The wraith manifested itself as whispers and sudden movements, making us question what was real. At one point, I was separated from my team, and the wraith used this to its advantage, showing me illusions of my sister, the one who'd started me on this path. It took all my training and willpower to push through the fear, to remind myself that none of it was real. When we finally cornered the wraith, it let out a bone-chilling wail, dissipating into thin air. I remember sinking to the ground, feeling as if it had drained a piece of my soul along with it. The toll of monster hunting isn't just physical, it's deeply psychological. After each encounter, there's a fleeting moment of relief, but it's quickly followed by a heavy wave of exhaustion, both mental and physical. It's one thing to survive a battle with a monster, but it's another to carry those memories with you, knowing that you'll face the same terror again and again. The Revenant encounter left me with a lasting reminder of my own vulnerability. Its strength, its relentless gaze, and the feeling of being so close to something that shouldn't exist, it left a mark. For weeks afterward, I was haunted by nightmares of those burning eyes, waking in a cold sweat, feeling as if it was still there, waiting. The physical bruises and cuts healed quickly, but the psychological scars lingered, making me question whether I was fit for this work. The FB provided support, counseling even, but there's only so much anyone can do. The terror stays with you. The Fenrir wolves taught me another lesson. Even a well-prepared hunter can be overwhelmed. The pack's strategic attacks were unlike anything I'd faced before. I spent days recovering from the wounds, my body aching in ways I hadn't thought possible. My muscles were bruised, my skin was torn, and every breath felt like it might be my last. The experience left me cautious, constantly on edge in forests, expecting to see shadows moving just out of reach. Then there was the Wraith. That encounter forced me to confront my own fears in ways I hadn't expected. The Wraith's ability to use personal memories against me shook me to my core. After that mission, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark had latched onto me, feeding off my despair and doubt. The FB's protocols suggested cleansing rituals and meditative techniques, but they could only do so much. For months, I avoided places with heavy shadows, and even the slightest flicker in the corner of my vision would send my heart racing. There's a weight that comes with each of these battles, a kind of weariness that isn't easy to put into words. The physical wounds fade, but they leave a mental residue. There's a strange sense of dread before each new mission, a tightening in my chest that reminds me of the price of survival. I've learned to push through it, to rely on the training that's kept me alive so far, but each encounter chips away at something inside. It's as if each monster takes a piece of me with it, and I wonder how much of myself will be left if I keep doing this. In the end, monster hunting isn't just about defeating creatures. It's about confronting fear, wrestling with doubt, and facing parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. These battles, these encounters, shape who I am in ways I never anticipated. And as much as I'd like to believe I'm getting stronger, I sometimes feel like the monsters leave their mark on me. Each one a reminder that there's a price for living in the shadows. Being a monster hunter isn't a job you can easily explain, let alone one you can openly discuss with loved ones. No matter how hard I try, I can't expect anyone in my life to truly understand the things I've seen, the scars I carry, or the constant presence of danger that shadows my every step. Over time, I've come to realize that maintaining relationships outside of this life is nearly impossible. People can sense when you're hiding something, and when your job involves hunting things that shouldn't exist, secrecy becomes second nature. At first, I attempted to preserve old friendships, keeping my work life separate from everything else. But the changes were inevitable. My friends began to notice the strain, the exhaustion that no amount of sleep could erase. They'd ask questions. Why couldn't I meet them for dinner? Why did I miss holidays? Why were my arms bruised? Or why did I seem so distracted? And the worst part, I couldn't answer them truthfully. Oh, I just spent the night fending off a ghoul in a cemetery. Doesn't go over well in casual conversation. So I withdrew, piece by piece, until the friendships faded away. Family was even harder. My mother especially tried to stay close, though she could sense something was wrong. I found myself pulling away from her as well, not wanting to burden her with the weight of my world. How could I explain the constant dread, the nights filled with nightmares, or the way I flinched at the slightest sound? I remember one conversation where she looked at me, her face full of concern, and asked, "Are you in trouble?" I wanted to tell her everything, to let her understand the toll my work was taking, but I just nodded, telling her I was handling it. I could see the disappointment in her eyes, the way she tried to hide her worry. We grew distant, and I became more isolated than ever. There's a profound loneliness that accompanies this life, a yearning for connection that feels just out of reach. Every missed call, every unexplained absence deepens the void between me and the world I once knew. I long for someone to share the weight of these experiences, to understand the silent battles I fight each day. But resigned to my fate, I continue down this path alone, carrying the burden of secrets that keep me apart from those I care about most. When you live in a world of monsters, however, you don't completely face it alone. Teammates become your closest allies, sometimes even your surrogate family. There's an unspoken understanding that binds hunters together. Each of us knows the dangers, the sacrifices, and the haunted look we all share. We trust each other with our lives, and there's a loyalty in that, a camaraderie that can't be found elsewhere. Take Graham, for instance. He's a seasoned hunter, someone who's been in this life longer than most. He's rough around the edges and has little patience for anything outside the job, but there's a consistency in him that I've come to rely on. He's the one who taught me the basics, and when things get tense, he's the one I look to. I've seen him in combat, the way he moves without hesitation, as if he's made peace with whatever fate awaits him. His calmness has saved me more than once, but our relationship is not exactly warm. We respect each other, yes, but there's a distance. It's almost as if we're both afraid to get too close, knowing how easily one of us could be gone in a heartbeat. Then there's Elena. She's newer to the FB, but fearless, with a natural talent for reading situations. Unlike Graham, she's more open, more willing to share parts of her life, which sometimes catches me off guard. She talks about her family back home, her little brother who doesn't know what she does for a living, and how she keeps hoping she can make it back in one piece. Her openness brings a certain warmth to our team, reminding me of the humanity I sometimes feel slipping away. But trust in this world is fragile. I learned this when I encountered a hunter named Marcus. At first, I admired him. He was skilled, confident, and seemed to know more about monsters than anyone I'd met. But during a mission, when things went wrong, I discovered that his loyalty wasn't to the team, but to himself. He left us to fend for ourselves, taking off in the middle of a fight when he realized the odds were against us. It was a harsh reminder that even among hunters, betrayal is a possibility. I managed to get out of that situation, but it left a bitter taste, making me wary of trusting anyone completely. In the end, teammates are crucial, and the bonds we form are forged in shared danger and survival. But there's always that knowledge, that quiet understanding that any one of us could turn, could break under the pressure. And when we lose someone, it's a void that never quite closes. Each death, each betrayal chips away at the small sense of security we cling to. One of the hardest parts of being a hunter is the relentless tug between personal attachment and unyielding duty. Every mission, every encounter forces me to face impossible choices, and those decisions weigh heavily on my soul, no matter how desperately I try to detach. I confronted this torment most painfully during a mission with Elena. We were tracking a rogue revenant, one that had evaded us for days, leaving a path of relentless destruction. When we finally cornered it in an abandoned warehouse on the town's outskirts, everything unraveled. The revenant was far stronger than anticipated, and in the ensuing battle, Elena became ensnared, trapped by the merciless creature. I stood at a crossroads, attempt to save her and risk the revenant's escape, or eliminate it to prevent further devastation. Those agonizing seconds stretched into an eternity as I grappled with my options. A wrong choice meant losing either Elena or innocent lives. Ultimately, I fired the fatal shot, silencing the revenant but failing to reach Elena in time. She survived, but not unscathed, and the sorrow in her eyes remains etched in my memory. She didn't hold me accountable, yet the pain in her gaze was a stark reminder of the sacrifices we endure. Duty sometimes demands heart-wrenching decisions that our souls can't reconcile. There are moments when doubt gnaws at me, questioning whether I made the right choice. These thoughts haunt me, tearing at the edges of my conscience. The mission was paramount, but at what personal cost? The boundary between duty and personal loyalty becomes increasingly blurred, making it impossible to find peace. Each similar dilemma chips away at my very essence, eroding my ability to care for anyone beyond the mission's scope. Another haunting instance was when I was recalled from leave for an emergency mission just as my mother fell gravely ill. It was a last-minute call, and I knew she needed me desperately, and yet I left. The job demanded it, and I made a choice that I knew would break her heart. She never understood, and I can't blame her. Upon my return, she was distant, colder than before. That mission saved lives, but it severed my mother's trust, a wound that time may never fully heal. These choices, these sacrifices, are the unseen burdens of monster hunting. This profession demands not only courage, but an unwavering willingness to place duty above everything else, even the ones you love most. Each decision makes it harder to remember why I embarked on this path in the first place. I find myself drifting away from the humanity I once cherished, becoming more consumed by the mission, the sheer necessity of survival, and less connected to the things that once gave my life meaning. In the end, monster hunting transcends the battle against creatures. It's a relentless struggle to hold on to fragments of myself in a world that demands the surrender of everything, including my very humanity. The loneliness, the growing distance from loved ones, the betrayals and the sacrifices, they are the true monsters, haunting me more profoundly than any creature I've ever faced. One of the most heartbreaking encounters I've ever had involved a creature that was anything but monstrous in spirit, though it looked every bit the part. It was a being known in our circles as a Grove Guardian. Grove Guardians are ancient territorial creatures, often taking the form of a massive animal or forest spirit. They are protectors by nature, bound to the lands they inhabit. Their sole purpose is to maintain balance within their domain, safeguarding it from those who would harm it. The Grove Guardian I encountered resided in a remote woodland area on the edge of town. Reports had begun to surface from hikers and locals about a hulking beast lurking in the trees, with sightings of glowing eyes and low growls echoing through the woods. Livestock from nearby farms had gone missing, and rumors about a killer beast started to spread among the townsfolk. It didn't take long for the FB to classify it as a potential threat, and I was assigned to investigate and, if necessary, neutralize the creature. Upon entering the forest, I observed signs of something large and powerful, claw marks on the trees and massive footprints in the soft earth. However, there was also an undeniable sense of calm in the air, an unusual harmony in the sounds of the forest. I anticipated finding a dangerous beast, but as I ventured deeper into its territory, the atmosphere felt almost sacred, peaceful. After hours of tracking, I finally encountered the Guardian. It was enormous, with fur like moss and leaves woven into its mane. Its eyes glowed a soft green, and its movements were slow and deliberate, radiating a wisdom that only time can bestow. As it looked at me, I didn't perceive any hostility. Instead, I felt a profound sadness, as if it were weary of the world it had guarded for so long. I soon realized the Guardian wasn't attacking out of malice. It was simply defending its land. The livestock it had taken were intruders on its territory, disrupting the fragile ecosystem it had protected for centuries. This creature, misunderstood and vilified, was nothing more than a caretaker striving to preserve its home. Despite orders, I couldn't bring myself to harm it. Instead, I reported back with a recommendation to fence off the area, creating a protected zone where the Guardian could live undisturbed. That encounter taught me a valuable lesson. Not all monsters are threats, and sometimes the real danger lies in human ignorance. The Guardian was misunderstood, labeled as a threat by those who didn't comprehend its purpose. It reminded me that sometimes our role as hunters isn't to destroy, but to protect, even if that means safeguarding creatures that others would perceive as monsters. Another unforgettable experience involved a creature that ventured into the human world, not out of hunger or malice, but out of longing. This one was a type of creature known as a wanderer. Wanderers are nomadic, shifting beings that can take on a human-like appearance. They're usually harmless, avoiding human interaction, but this one was different. It began with strange sightings in a quiet suburban neighborhood, glimpses of an unusual figure standing on doorsteps, staring into windows and wandering the streets at night. People were frightened, assuming it was some kind of prowler or disturbed individual, and they called the police multiple times, but each time the creature vanished before they arrived. The FB sent me in to investigate, suspecting it was a creature that had crossed into human territory with unknown intentions. When I finally tracked it down, I was surprised to find it was a wanderer. Its form was ghostly, translucent, with a vaguely human shape, but with elongated limbs and hollow eyes that seemed to see right through me. It was standing in front of a house, looking at the family inside as they ate dinner. It wasn't hiding or trying to harm them. It was simply watching, almost with a sense of longing. As I observed it, I noticed it was clutching something close to its chest. Upon closer inspection, I saw it was a small, worn photograph of a family. After some investigation, I learned that the family in the picture had passed away years ago in a tragic accident. The wanderer had somehow come across this photograph and believed the people in it were its lost kin. It had ventured into the human world, not to cause harm, but to find the family it believed it had lost. I faced a choice, to eliminate it as per protocol, or to help it find peace. I chose the latter. I sat with the creature, letting it show me the photograph, and gently explaining in the simplest terms that its family was gone. I watched as the realization dawned in its hollow eyes, a look of profound sorrow and acceptance. The creature let out a mournful sound, a low, haunting cry that echoed through the night. Then slowly it faded, returning to the other side, leaving behind nothing but the photograph on the ground. The Wanderer's story was one of the most tragic I'd encountered. It reminded me that monsters, like humans, could experience loss, loneliness, and the need for connection. This creature wasn't a danger. It was a lost soul searching for its family, driven by a pain that was all too familiar. In that moment, I saw it as more than a monster. It was simply another being, burdened by sorrow and seeking a sense of belonging. Not every mission requires violence, and some of the most impactful lessons I've learned have come from those times when I chose not to fight. These moments have shown me that not every creature we encounter is evil or dangerous, and that sometimes our role as hunters is not to destroy, but to understand. One such instance involved a creature called a moon gazer. These beings are rare, ethereal creatures drawn to moonlight. They appear only on nights when the moon is full, silently wandering open fields and reflecting the light in a beautiful, ghostly glow. Moon gazers are known to be harmless, but they're often mistaken for spirits or apparitions, leading people to fear them. The FB received reports of a ghost haunting a rural field, and I was dispatched to investigate. When I arrived, I saw the moon gazer standing in the middle of the field, its form shimmering under the light of the full moon. It looked like a being made of light, fragile and otherworldly. It wasn't doing anything but standing there, gazing up at the sky with a sense of wonder, as if drawn to the moon in a way that transcended comprehension. I approached it carefully, but it didn't react. It seemed completely absorbed in its quiet ritual, oblivious to my presence. I realized that this creature posed no threat. It was simply existing, drawn to something it found beautiful. There was no reason to intervene, no justification for disrupting its peaceful moment. I stayed there for hours, watching as it basked in the moonlight until the dawn broke and it faded away with the first light of morning. That encounter taught me the importance of restraint, of recognizing when violence is unnecessary. The moongazer was not a creature of malice. It was a creature of beauty, one that reminded me that not every being we call monster deserves to be feared or destroyed. Sometimes, they're simply creatures seeking moments of peace, much like ourselves. Each of these encounters has left a lasting impact on me, challenging my understanding of what it means to be a monster hunter. These creatures, the misunderstood guardian, the grieving wanderer, the tranquil moongazer, have shown me that there's more to this world than black and white, more than good and evil. They've taught me that empathy and understanding are just as important as strength and skill. That sometimes the greatest act of courage is choosing not to fight. These lessons have stayed with me, reminding me to look beyond appearances, to question my assumptions, and to consider that perhaps not all monsters are meant to be hunted. In a world where fear often drives us to violence, these encounters serve as reminders that sometimes understanding is the most powerful tool we have. In the realm of monster hunting, we don't only encounter misunderstood creatures or lost souls searching for peace. There are monsters who are nothing short of bloodthirsty beasts, creatures driven by a primal hunger and an insatiable urge to destroy. These beings don't have a sense of purpose beyond chaos, and their existence revolves around killing and consuming anything they can find. They are the ones that most hunters fear, the ones that are often spoken of only in whispers around campfires. The danger they pose isn't just a story, it's a reality that has claimed the lives of many. One such creature is the bloodshade. Bloodshades are a rare but deadly type of beast. They move in silence, their bodies almost blending into the shadows. Bloodshades are nocturnal, and once they catch the scent of blood, there is little that can stop them. Their eyes glow a deep crimson in the darkness, a sight that many hunters recognize as the last thing seen by those who didn't survive. Bloodshades attack with an almost supernatural speed, clawing and biting, ripping apart their prey in seconds. Unlike other monsters that may kill out of necessity or survival, bloodshades seem to revel in the act of violence, often leaving a scene of carnage that speaks to their nature. Another beast that brings fear to even the most seasoned hunters is the hellhound. Hellhounds are massive, dog-like creatures with fiery eyes and a blackened, scorched appearance. They hunt in packs, coordinating their attacks with an intelligence that surpasses most animals. Their bite is just deadly. It's toxic, spreading a venom that paralyzes their victims. When they hunt, they move silently, circling their prey before launching a coordinated attack. Hellhounds are relentless, and they don't back down. They're known to chase targets across vast distances, following them for days if necessary. Their insatiable hunger and coordinated attacks make them one of the most challenging monsters to face. The third type of creature is something even darker, known simply as the Soul Eater. Unlike the Bloodshade or Hellhound, the Soul Eater does not leave a blood-soaked path of destruction. Instead, it feeds off life itself. Soul Eaters are wraith-like beings that drain the very essence of life from their victims, leaving them as empty shells. They are often found in abandoned places, lurking in the dark, waiting for someone to wander close enough for them to latch onto. The Soul Eater can't be seen with the naked eye unless it chooses to reveal itself, making it an exceptionally difficult creature to track or predict. Those who encounter it often feel an overwhelming sense of despair and lethargy, a chilling sign that their life force is slowly being drawn away. Soul Eaters leave behind no physical evidence, only bodies that look as though all hope and vitality have been stripped away. Hunting these creatures isn't merely a test of bravery and strength. It demands precision, meticulous planning, and strategic execution. Each of these beasts presents a unique set of challenges, and charging in unprepared is tantamount to courting death. Over the years, we've developed specialized tactics and methods tailored to each monster type, designed to exploit their vulnerabilities while minimizing our risks. Bloodshades require a strategy that prioritizes avoidance of direct confrontation. Their speed and lethality in close quarters make them formidable opponents. Our approach focuses on setting traps that leverage their heightened sense of smell and their predilection for blood. One of our most effective strategies involves creating blood trails that lead into confined areas fortified with silver, an element to which bloodshades are particularly susceptible. Once they enter, we activate the trap, deploying nets coated in silver and intense lighting to contain them. Bloodshades have an aversion to light, which disrupts their ability to meld into the shadows. Rapid neutralization is crucial once they are trapped, as prolonged exposure increases the risk of them breaking free. Hellhounds necessitate an entirely different tactical approach due to their pack dynamics. Isolating an individual from the group is paramount. We frequently employ decoys, either in the form of a person or baited traps, to lure a single hellhound away from its pack. Once isolated, we utilize ranged weapons treated with wolfsbane, a toxin known to be lethal to hellhounds. The team is divided into units, with one group drawing the pack's attention while the others target the isolated hellhound. Given their intelligence, precision in executing this strategy is non-negotiable. A single misstep can alert the entire pack, drastically diminishing our chances of survival. The Soul Eater presents a challenge unparalleled by other creatures. Traditional physical attacks are ineffective against its ethereal form, rendering conventional weapons useless. The only known method to weaken a Soul Eater involves the use of symbols and items that anchor it to our plane, effectively trapping it. We employ salt circles, iron chains, and protective symbols to contain it long enough to drive it back. These hunts demand unwavering calmness and exceptional mental resilience, as the Soul Eater can induce intense fear and hopelessness, disrupting concentration. I have witnessed hunters succumb to the psychological strain of its presence, abandoning their missions in terror. To counter this, we wear amulets of protection and some recite incantations to maintain mental clarity. This endeavor transcends a mere hunt. It is a battle of wills. Each hunt demands seamless teamwork, precise coordination, and relentless focus. Our preparations are exhaustive, with every team member assigned a critical role. Months of planning can culminate in a single mission, complete with contingency plans for every conceivable scenario. Yet, no level of preparation can guarantee success. The monsters we pursue are intelligent, adaptable, and deadly, and even the smallest miscalculation can result in catastrophe. In this line of work, our survival hinges not only on our strength and courage, but on our ability to think strategically and execute with unwavering precision. Every mission is a high-stakes operation where meticulous planning and disciplined execution are the keys to overcoming the formidable threats that stand between us and the safety of the human world. No amount of training or strategy can prepare you for the moments when everything goes wrong. In this line of work, loss is an inevitability, a constant shadow that lingers over every mission. There have been times when we've lost people, good, brave hunters who were more than just colleagues, they were family. Each loss leaves a mark, a void that nothing can fill. And over time, these voids accumulate, weighing heavily on those of us who survive. One of the darkest missions I've ever been on involved a pack of hellhounds. We were a team of 6, each of us seasoned and well-prepared, or so we thought. The mission was simple. Eliminate the hellhound pack that had been terrorizing a village on the outskirts of a dense forest. We had a plan, baiting and isolating one of the hounds to weaken the pack. But the hellhounds were smarter than we anticipated. They sensed the trap and turned it against us. In a matter of minutes, the hunt descended into chaos. The hellhounds moved with terrifying coordination, flanking us from both sides. One of my teammates, Caleb, was separated from the group, and before we could reach him, they were upon him. I'll never forget the sound, the horrible, visceral tearing that echoed through the forest. By the time we got to him, it was too late. Caleb was gone, his body left in a state that none of us could bear to look at. We had to retreat, leaving the pack undefeated. That failure, that loss, stayed with me long after we returned. It wasn't just the loss of a teammate, it was the loss of a friend, a brother in arms. There was another mission involving a Soul Eater, one that almost claimed my life and the lives of my entire team. We had prepared for months, studying every known tactic, equipping ourselves with symbols and charms meant to protect us from its influence. But the Soul Eater was stronger than we'd anticipated. The moment we stepped into its territory, a feeling of dread washed over us, paralyzing us with fear. I could feel my energy draining, as if my very essence was being pulled away. My vision blurred, and I heard my teammates' voices fade into whispers. One by one, they fell, succumbing to the Soul Eater's draining presence. I remember the look in Elena's eyes as she collapsed, a mix of terror and acceptance. I fought to stay conscious, clinging to my amulet and reciting the incantation we'd learned. It was a battle against my own mind as much as it was against the creature. Somehow we managed to break free, dragging ourselves out of its reach, but the cost was high. Elena never fully recovered. She left the FB soon after, unable to shake the psychological scars the Soul Eater had left on her. These losses have a way of creeping into your thoughts, of haunting you long after the mission is over. They shake your confidence, make you question every decision, every plan. Each time a teammate falls, it chips away at something inside of you, leaving behind a scar that no amount of time can fully heal. It's a brutal reminder that no matter how strong or skilled we become, we are not invincible. Each hunt has the potential to be our last, and every loss is a stark reminder of the fragile line we walk between life and death. In this line of work, pain and loss are constants. They become a part of you, shaping you into someone who can endure, who can push through the horror, the fear, and the grief. But with each hunt, each fallen teammate, the weight grows heavier. I sometimes wonder how long I can carry it, how long any of us can. Monster hunting isn't just a battle against beasts. It's a battle against the toll it takes on our souls. We fight to protect others, to keep the world safe, but in the process, we lose pieces of ourselves. And the monsters, the bloodthirsty creatures we hunt, aren't the only threats we face. The real danger lies in the scars we carry, in the emptiness left by those we've lost, and in the haunting memories that remind us of the cost of survival. Being a monster hunter isn't merely about the physical act of fighting, it's an ongoing mental and moral struggle that accompanies every step of the way. I entered this line of work with a clear intention: to protect people and eliminate the threats that lurked in the shadows. Yet as I encountered creature after creature, doubts began to surface, forcing me to question the very ethics of my actions. Not every monster was a rampaging beast. Many of them, as strange or intimidating as they appeared, were simply trying to survive, much like any other living being. There was a time I came across a creature called a nestling. These beings are ferocious when threatened, but they're usually harmless scavengers that depend on the forests and mountains to sustain themselves. The nestling I encountered was near a small village, venturing in search of food after its habitat had been ravaged by deforestation. The villagers, frightened by the sight of a creature that seemed otherworldly, had reported it to the FB as a dangerous monster. When I arrived, the nestling was rummaging through trash, its movements clumsy yet non-threatening. Protocol demanded that I eliminate it, but as I watched, I saw no malice in its eyes, only hunger and confusion. The creature wasn't attacking anyone. It was merely surviving. I could perceive a certain intelligence in its gaze, and in that moment, I realized that killing it would feel more like an execution than an act of protection. Against orders, I chose to lure it away from the village, guiding it back into the wilderness where it could exist without interference. That decision marked a profound turning point for me. I began to question whether my duty was to simply kill anything deemed unnatural or to preserve the balance of life, even if that meant sparing some of the very creatures I was sent to hunt. This dilemma became a recurring theme in my work. Every time I raised my weapon, I had to ask myself if the creature before me was truly a threat or if it was simply another being struggling to survive. I started to understand that the label of monster was arbitrary. Many of these creatures had their own forms of society, their own instincts, and their own means of survival. The act of killing wasn't always heroic or justified. Sometimes, it felt like a brutal and unnecessary end to a creature that had just as much a right to exist as any human. These reflections have left me in a constant state of inner conflict, grappling with the moral implications of my role. I find myself questioning the very foundation of what it means to hunt monsters. Is it our duty to eradicate them, or should we strive to understand and coexist with these misunderstood beings? The uncertainty lingers, a persistent reminder that the line between right and wrong is often blurred in the darkness we seek to illuminate. In moments of solitude, I ponder the true nature of these creatures and the choices we make in their name. The questions remain unresolved, echoing in the depths of my conscience. As I continue this path, the struggle between duty and empathy becomes ever more palpable, challenging me to reconcile my mission with the growing realization that sometimes understanding might be the most compassionate act of all. Over time, I found myself changing in ways that I hadn't anticipated. As a hunter, I was trained to be relentless, to move in the shadows, to understand my prey's weaknesses and exploit them mercilessly. But as I continued, those instincts started to bleed into my everyday life. I began to notice that I was always on alert, my senses heightened even when I was off duty. I'd walk down a crowded street and instinctively look for exits, study people's movements, and assess them as potential threats. In some ways, I was becoming more like the creatures I hunted, isolated, predatory, and wary of everything around me. The transition wasn't just in my actions, it seeped into my thoughts and values. I was becoming desensitized to violence, almost numb to the things that would once have shaken me. There were moments when I would catch myself looking at people with the same calculating gaze I used on creatures, wondering how I might defend myself against them if the need arose. I started to question if there was anything left of the person I had once been, or if I was just a weapon, honed and shaped by years of hunting. As I noticed these changes, I found it harder to interact with those outside of the monster hunting world. Ordinary people felt like a different species altogether, and I struggled to relate to their worries, their fears, or even their joys. I no longer shared their sense of innocence or naivety. I had seen things, done things that I couldn't speak about, and it left me feeling detached. It was as though every encounter with a monster stripped away a piece of my humanity, leaving behind something colder, harder, and more primal. In my darkest moments, I feared that I was no longer just hunting monsters, but becoming one. The lines between hunter and hunted began to blur. The ruthlessness that once helped me survive now felt like a curse, a constant reminder that the monster world had left a mark on me that couldn't be erased. With each hunt, I became more aware of the thin, almost invisible line that separates humans from monsters. There were times when I would look into the eyes of a creature and see a reflection of myself, hungry, desperate, driven by instincts I could barely control. I started to see humanity in the creatures I hunted, recognizing traits that mirrored our own. And conversely, I began to see monstrous qualities in myself and in those around me. One encounter that forced me to confront this blurred line was a mission involving a ghoul king. Ghouls are typically mindless scavengers driven by hunger, but this one was different. It was intelligent, with a clear sense of purpose and control over other ghouls. It wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, ruling over its territory with a cold calculation. During our encounter, it spoke to me, asking why I was there, why I was trying to kill it when it had done nothing but defend its own. Its voice was deep and resonant, filled with a mix of sadness and resentment. Its words haunted me. This creature wasn't just some mindless beast. It had its own society, its own hierarchy, and even a sense of morality, twisted as it may have been. As I fought it, I felt a strange kinship, a shared understanding that we were both acting on instincts programmed into us by forces beyond our control. I eventually killed the Ghoul King, but the encounter left me shaken. It forced me to consider the possibility that monsters were not so different from humans, that our labels of good and evil were far more subjective than I had once believed. This understanding deepened as I encountered more intelligent creatures, each with their own motivations, societies, and even emotions. I saw how humans, too, could become monstrous, how fear could drive us to commit unspeakable acts against those we deemed other. The boundary between humanity and monstrosity was not as clear as I had once thought, and with each mission, I felt myself slipping further into a gray area, where right and wrong were indistinguishable from one another. Perhaps the most haunting part of this journey is the gradual loss of humanity, a creeping numbness that takes hold as the years go by. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a slow, almost imperceptible descent. You start by becoming desensitized to the violence, brushing off the memories of blood and pain as just another day on the job. But over time, the emotional toll begins to show in subtle ways. I stopped feeling genuine joy or excitement, and the mundane pleasures of life lost their appeal. Holidays, family gatherings, moments of celebration, they all felt hollow. I couldn't connect with others the way I used to. My emotions felt muted, like I was watching my own life from a distance. I found myself unable to empathize with people's everyday concerns. How could I relate to someone's frustration over a missed promotion or a broken relationship when I had seen people ripped apart, when I had fought to keep the darkness at bay? The mental strain of hunting monsters is something that no amount of training can prepare you for. The nightmares come frequently, vivid memories of every creature I've faced, every life I've taken. Sleep offers no escape, only a replay of the horrors I've endured. And each time I close my eyes, I'm reminded that I am part of that world now, that the monsters I hunt are as much a part of me as the person I once was. I worry about losing the ability to feel compassion, to connect with others on a meaningful level. The work hardens you, builds walls that block out anything that might distract you from the hunt. I've seen other hunters lose themselves completely, becoming little more than shadows of the people they once were. They go through the motions, driven by a singular purpose, but there's a hollowness in their eyes, a deadness that mirrors the creatures they hunt. This job has taken pieces of me, parts of my soul that I will never get back. There's a coldness within me now, a detachment that makes me question whether I can still call myself human. Each monster I hunt brings me closer to the edge, closer to becoming the very thing I despise. I fear that one day I won't be able to distinguish between myself and the creatures I'm sworn to eliminate. And when that day comes, I wonder if there will be anyone left who cares enough to stop me. In the end, the greatest monster I face may not be the creatures in the dark, but the person I see in the mirror. The hunter who, over time, has become something else entirely, something no longer fully human. This journey has shown me that monstrosity is not always defined by appearance or origin. It can grow within, fed by pain, loss, and the choices we make. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying revelation of all. Every battle I have fought has imparted a unique lesson, each one a poignant reminder of what it takes to survive in this vocation. Through each encounter, I have come to understand that the life of a monster hunter demands more than mere physical strength and tactical acumen. It requires sacrifices of time, relationships, and sometimes parts of oneself that can never be reclaimed. Those who have stood beside me and those who have fallen have taught me that bravery is not solely about confronting terrifying creatures. It is about bearing the cost of each battle, recognizing that some conflicts leave scars that never fully heal. One of the most profound lessons arose from witnessing others make sacrifices I was not prepared for. I have seen teammates thrust themselves into danger to protect one another, fully aware that their actions might mean they do not return. These sacrifices are not driven by glory or recognition. They are acts of selflessness, motivated by a commitment to something greater than oneself. From them, I learned the true weight of responsibility and the humbling realization that ultimately it is the small, courageous choices, the willingness to stand with someone in their darkest hour, that define a hunter's worth. Humility has been a continual lesson. There is no place for ego in this line of work. Monsters have a way of revealing your limits, stripping away any illusions of invincibility. I have faced creatures that were smarter, stronger, and faster than I could have ever imagined. Each close call, every moment of sheer terror, has reminded me that survival is often as much a matter of chance as it is of skill. This work has taught me not to underestimate any creature, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. Every time I have let my guard down or overestimated my abilities, it has come back to haunt me, often at a great cost. I have learned to approach each hunt with respect, not only for the creatures I confront, but also for the risks that accompany every decision I make. When I first embarked on the path of a monster hunter, I viewed the role in stark, simplistic terms, safeguarding humanity by eradicating threats, ensuring the world's safety through the removal of monsters. However, as time unfolded, I came to grasp that protecting humanity embodies a far more intricate and nuanced duty. It transcends the mere act of vanquishing creatures. It involves maintaining a delicate balance, fostering a coexistence that averts needless conflict. Humans and monsters, despite their inherent differences, inhabit this shared world, and there exists a fine line between defending our people and becoming agents of destruction ourselves. Through my journey, I have come to understand that safeguarding humanity sometimes necessitates protecting monsters as well. Not all of them are perilous. Some serve as guardians of the natural world, upholding ecosystems that humans scarcely comprehend. By indiscriminately eliminating these beings, we risk disrupting the equilibrium, fostering a world where fear and ignorance lead to the annihilation of the unknown. In numerous instances, I have discovered that assisting monsters in finding their rightful place, guiding them away from human settlements, proves to be a more effective resolution than force. This realization underscores that the role of a hunter is not always to kill, but to mediate, ensuring that both realms can coexist with minimal harm. There are moments when humans can be as perilous as the monsters we dread. The genuine threat often does not emanate from claws or fangs, but from our own actions. The fear, prejudice, and anger that compel us to destroy what we do not understand. Protecting humanity entails shielding it from itself just as much as from external dangers. It involves guiding people to recognize that not every unfamiliar force is an adversary, that understanding and compassion can frequently serve as our greatest defenses. In this line of work, I have witnessed how fear can obscure judgment, driving individuals to act in ways that merely exacerbate conflict. At times, my mission has been to protect monsters from humans as much as the reverse, preserving a fragile peace that is vital for the harmony of both worlds. After years of battling monsters, the person I am now is barely recognizable from the one who first set out on this path. Each mission, each close call, and every loss has chipped away at the edges of who I once was, reshaping me into someone I never imagined I'd become. I entered this life with a desire to prove myself, to find purpose and meaning. But what I found was something much deeper, a painful yet profound understanding of my own humanity, my capacity for resilience, and the inner strength I never knew I had. Over time, I've let go of the black and white perspective that once defined my actions. I no longer see the world in terms of heroes and monsters, right and wrong. Instead, I've come to understand that every being, human or otherwise, is driven by its own instincts, fears, and desires. My perspective has shifted from one of judgment to one of empathy. I've learned to approach each encounter with an open mind, to consider the motivations and struggles of the creatures I face, rather than simply labeling them as threats to be eliminated. This journey has taught me the value of inner peace, of finding stability within myself, even as I move through a world filled with chaos. I've learned to rely on my instincts, to trust in my own judgment, and to navigate the moral complexities that come with every choice I make. But perhaps the greatest transformation has been in recognizing the importance of balance, not just in the world around me, but within myself. I've come to accept that I am both hunter and human, that my identity is a blend of courage and fear, strength and vulnerability. This realization has allowed me to find a sense of peace in my work, a purpose that goes beyond mere survival. I no longer hunt to prove my worth or to conquer the unknown. Now, I hunt to protect, to preserve the fragile equilibrium that sustains both our worlds. And in doing so, I've found a sense of fulfillment that transcends personal ambition. My work has become more than a job. It's a calling, a way to make a difference in a world where darkness and light coexist in ways that are often difficult to comprehend. If there's one thing I hope to convey through my experiences, it's the importance of empathy, of approaching the unknown with a sense of curiosity rather than fear. The creatures I've encountered, the ones I've fought and the ones I've spared, have taught me that every being, regardless of how it appears, has a story, a purpose, and a right to exist. In a world that often encourages us to react with suspicion or hostility, I've learned that understanding is one of our greatest tools. Empathy allows us to bridge gaps, to see beyond our assumptions, and to recognize the value in even the most unfamiliar forms of life. I also hope to inspire a sense of curiosity in others, a willingness to look beyond the surface and question the narratives we've been taught. Monsters, in many ways, are reflections of our own fears, projections of what we don't understand. By exploring these unknowns, by asking questions and seeking knowledge, we not only expand our understanding of the world, but also confront the parts of ourselves that we may have overlooked. Curiosity is what drives progress, and it's what helps us grow beyond the limitations of fear. Lastly, I want to encourage ethical reflection, a call to examine the ways in which our actions impact the world and the beings within it. The world is filled with complex moral choices, and there are no easy answers. But by approaching each situation with integrity, by considering the consequences of our actions, we can make decisions that honor the delicate balance that sustains life. The creatures I've hunted, the lives I've taken or spared, each represent a choice, a moment of ethical significance that has shaped who I am. Through my experiences, I've come to see that the true test of humanity lies not in our power to dominate, but in our ability to coexist, to recognize that we are all part of a larger, interconnected world. If there's one lesson I want to leave with others, it's this. Be brave enough to face the unknown, compassionate enough to seek understanding, and wise enough to honor the balance that sustains us all. In a world filled with both darkness and light, our choices define who we are, not just as individuals but as a society, and perhaps in the end, that's what truly separates us from the monsters we fear.